When I was at university, I made one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made with a computer. I installed Linux on my laptop without properly researching what I was doing, and while I was in the middle of finishing my final semester work. Looking back at it now, I have honestly no idea what I was thinking, but that mistake actually started a journey that eventually led to me using Linux every day. So for anyone who doesn't know what Linux is, it's an operating system just like Windows or Mac. The difference is that Linux comes in lots of different versions, and these are called distributions. People use it for everything, from coding, programming, to cybersecurity, to everyday different tasks. The first version I ever tried of Linux was called Ubuntu. I was in my first year at university and I started hearing about all these different tools with regards to Linux and technologies that computers were capable of doing. I came across Linux and thought, wow, this looks really interesting. I want to try this. At the time, I was always someone who really liked to experiment and try new things. In some ways, I'm still like that today. The problem was, I didn't do enough research before jumping in. I found out that you could install Linux alongside Windows using what was called a partition. I thought, perfect, I'll just install this, keep Windows, and everything will be fine, right? So I downloaded Ubuntu, put it onto a USB drive, installed it into my laptop, and honestly, the installation seemed pretty straightforward. Ubuntu loaded up, and I had Linux running. But then the problem started. I restarted my computer, and suddenly the screen started to flicker and it went black. I couldn't understand what was happening because I felt like I had installed everything correctly. The new operating system was there, but somehow I couldn't even get back into Windows. At this point, I was in the middle of university and I had coursework to finish and I was starting to panic. I did what any sensible person would do. I took it to a computer repair shop. Luckily, they managed to get the laptop working again, and I thought everything was going to be okay. I still had my files, so that was good. Windows was back, and I thought, great, the problem's been solved. I can just carry on with my coursework. Except it wasn't. I was in a lecture, and I was sat down, and then in the classroom, suddenly the screen went black again. This time I had no idea what had happened. I went to my lecturer actually, who was really into computers, and he suggested that maybe what had happened was the graphics card had corrupted, although I don't quite know what that at the time, and I still don't know if it was actually the graphics card to this day. Thankfully, I managed to borrow a Mac and finish the important parts of my coursework. But that was my first experience with Linux, complete chaos, and after that experience, you would probably think I would never touch Linux again. But strangely enough, I kept being interested in it. During work experience, I mentioned that I was interested in Linux, and I continued researching it, trialing it, and being fascinated by it. However, I never really got to the stage again of having it on my main computer because I hadn't fully understood what I had done wrong. Instead, I started using something called a virtual machine. A virtual machine pretty much will let you run another operating system inside your computer without having to change your main setups. So it's just another application, you open the application and you just download the Linux. And this actually allowed me to work with experimenting with Linux just without any of the hassle of worrying about what was going to go wrong with my computer. And then a few years later, I was actually given another laptop through work, and I already had a perfectly good working computer, so I thought to myself, what am I actually going to do with this spare laptop? And I jokingly in my mind thought, maybe I'll install Linux again. Thing is, that's exactly what I did. And this time, it went so much better. Fast forward a few more years, and my Asus ZenBook started struggling with Windows 11. The laptop wasn't old, it had good specifications, but the fans were just constantly running, which was odd because I had very little installed on it and it just didn't run as smooth as it should. So I decided to try Linux again. This time I did the research properly on my older computer, so this was the Dell laptop from work. I installed Fedora Workstation, and I have to say, I was very surprised and impressed by how well it looked and how well it functioned. The laptop wasn't that good in terms of specs, but Linux just made it feel like a completely new usable machine again. I could customize it to change how it functioned, it operated, everything worked, and it just felt like really lightweight. On my Acer ZenBook, I installed what's called Pop! OS. Now, there's a bit of controversy online about whether or not Pop! OS is actually any good or not, and to be honest, my general experience with it has been quite mixed. Some people recommending it, saying that, like, it's pretty good, but then I find there's a lot of limitations with what you can actually do and customize on it. Still early days. I found so far Fedora to be easier to navigate. It has great features, but there are definitely some things that require a little bit of patience just because it's a more intermediate level of using Linux. However, with that said, that's the interesting thing about Linux. There's so many distributions and lots of different versions to try out for yourself. Each are designed for just lots of different people. And I can understand how overwhelming this is. So I actually found an option for this. If you're interested in trying Linux, but you don't want to install anything, like even just on your computer, there's a website where you can test different Linux distributionc.com. I'll put it in the description. Pretty much you can just log in on your web browser, just wait in a queue, and then you can just trial everything out. Personally, I do recommend people use Linux. Not because Windows or Mac is bad. I mean, some people talk bad about them, but I think they can have their uses. Everything has got its pros and cons. Linux just, however, seems to give you more options and more flexibility and freedom. Because over the years, I've had a lot of problems with Windows and I've had problems with Mac. And to be honest, while I did have some problems with Linux, they were very quick and easy to figure out. There's always going to be a forum to figure out something. Everything is very well documented. I mean, nothing is going to be 100% perfect. But what I like about Linux is it just gives you so much control over your computer. You're very much learning how things work, and you can customize your experience and breathe new life into old hardware. Because some Windows computers are really old and they force you to upgrade, same with the Mac, but with Linux you can just install it straight away. And this is what I find really funny is that it started with me accidentally breaking my university laptop to becoming something I really genuinely enjoy learning about and I think more people should explore.